It wasn't the dark that scared Alara. It was the specific, unbearable lightness of her own body that signaled its arrival. The moment her mind woke up, but her limbs refused to follow, she knew the auditor was already in the room. He never entered. He was simply there, sitting silently at the foot of her bed in the low-slung reading chair, his presence heavier than a collapsing star. Alara lived on the 27th floor of a newly built tower fortress of glass and steel, where nothing old or mysterious was supposed to exist. But the auditor was neither old nor mysterious. He was terrifyingly, clinically modern. He wore a suit the color of wet asphalt, the cut of the fabric immaculate, and his skin was a smooth, unsettling gray, like polished granite. His face was the worst part, completely smooth, without a nose, ears, or hair, possessing only two deeply set, perfectly black eyes that held no light, no malice, and no mercy. He wasn't there to hurt her physically. He was there to assess her. The paralysis always began the same way, a sudden, electric buzz traveling from her spine to her fingertips, locking every muscle fiber into cement. She would try to twitch a finger, scream a name, or roll over, but her body would remain a useless husk, a silent scream trapped inside her chest. The first time the auditor came, 6 months ago, she was frantic, writhing mentally against the unseen chains. He had simply tilted his head, a smooth, inhuman gesture, and placed a thick, leather-bound ledger on his lap. He opened it, and the sound of the pages, turning dry, crisp, definitive, was the only sound in the apartment. Alara Vance. His voice resonated, but not from his smooth mouth. It seemed to originate from the air itself, a deep, monotone frequency that vibrated in her teeth. Section 4, Subsection B, Failure to Maximize Potential. Then, he began to read. He didn't read her bank statements or her text messages. He read her omissions. He listed every phone call she had intended to make to her grieving mother, but delayed. He documented every single time she had taken a professionally convenient decision over a morally sound one. He meticulously detailed the years she spent avoiding her passion for painting, logging the exact cumulative hours wasted staring at the ceiling. The cumulative cost of indecision. 2,100 hours, he stated flatly. The cost of avoiding difficult conversations. 7 years of strained familial relationships. The cost of pursuing comfort over integrity. ... And the list would continue, each point a hammer blow of objective truth against her subjective reality. Alara realized this was worse than any shadow demon. The auditor was the physical manifestation of her own regret, a paralyzing fear of failure, given a perfectly tailored suit and a relentless ledger. Last night, the auditor returned for the 3rd chapter of his audit. He hadn't changed his position, but this time, the ledger was thicker, almost overflowing with paper. He didn't start with professional failures. He started with the boy from college, Daniel, whom she had ghosted after he confessed his feelings because she feared commitment. Case file: Daniel Hayes. Damage assessment: moderate psychological scarring, lingering trust issues, your calculated motivation, fear of future vulnerability. His voice was utterly devoid of emotion, yet the words pierced her heart with surgical precision. She tried to cry, but no tears would come. She tried to explain, to plead the complexities of human emotion, but her jaw was locked tight. The horror wasn't the paralysis. The horror was the forced, inescapable confrontation with every lie she had told herself to justify her compromises. The auditor was the ultimate, inescapable mirror. On his next page, he read a new section, Section 5, Subsection C, Deliberate Misrepresentation of Self. He spent 40 minutes detailing all the online personas she maintained, the edited photos, the fabricated stories of success she used to impress strangers, the calculated expenditure of emotional energy on maintaining a false front, equivalent to 2 full-time jobs. Result: 0 genuine connections. Conclusion: inefficient expenditure of life force. Ilara's breathing became ragged, shallow. She felt a crushing weight on her chest, a pressure she knew was not physical but spiritual, the weight of her own wasted potential. When he finally looked up from the ledger, his blank eyes bore into her. He didn't speak. He just held up a small, blank mirror, its surface perfectly reflective. Ilara saw her face strained, tearless, immobile, and then she saw something else. A tiny, faint, smooth, gray outline reflecting behind her. A figure just behind her shoulder that looked exactly like the Auditor, only smaller, forming out of the residual regret he had just calculated. He was cloning himself. He was multiplying. The final words he spoke before the paralysis released her were the most devastating. Assessment complete. Your balance sheet indicates a recurring pattern of moral and emotional bankruptcy. The interest accrues tonight. She woke up gasping, but the dread lingered. The next night, the paralysis hit instantly, and this time, there were two figures in the room. The Auditor sat at the foot of the bed, and a smaller, slightly fuzzier gray figure stood silently by the window, already holding a miniature, blank ledger. The audit was continuing, and she knew she was running out of time before the interest consumed her completely, body and soul. The terror was not just in the inability to move, but in the certainty that if you could, it would be too late. For Daniel, sleep paralysis wasn't a shadow or a demon. It was the grotesque figure of porcelain and winding gears that had sat on his grandmother's shelf for 30 years, now stood 3 feet from his face, winding its own key. The doll's name was Barnaby. It wasn't a toy for play. It was a museum piece, nearly 3 feet tall, dressed in frayed velvet knickerbockers and a stiff lace collar. Its porcelain face cracked down the left eye, giving it a permanent, unsettling sneer. Daniel's grandmother, a collector of morbid antiques, insisted it was just charmingly old. But Daniel, even as a small child, knew Barnaby watched him. He specifically remembered the doll always facing the bookshelf in the spare room. Now, 30 years later, Daniel inherited the old, creaking house, and Barnaby was still there, relocated to the landing outside Daniel's bedroom door, still facing the wall. Daniel, a man of rational science, found the doll disturbing, but harmless, a relic of a bygone era, until the paralysis began. It started subtly, a feeling of unease as he drifted off. Then, the full lockdown. He'd wake up fully aware, but trapped, unable to twitch even an eyelid. The silence of the old house amplifying the drumming of his own heart. He would lie there, staring blankly at the ceiling, waiting for the terror to materialize. And it always did. Barnaby, it always did. Barnaby. The first night, Daniel was paralyzed, facing the wall. He heard a soft, delicate tap-tap-tap coming from the landing. It was the sound of its polished leather shoe striking the wooden floor. Then, the rhythmic, high-pitched worry began, the sound of its internal mechanism winding up. He didn't need to see it to know what was happening. Barnaby was winding his own key. The tap-tap-tap grew closer, excruciatingly slow, each step separated by long, agonizing minutes of silence, worry, and then another tap. Finally, the tapping stopped at the threshold of his room. Daniel's breath hitched, shallow and useless. He felt the cold, oppressive stillness of the room change, as if a large, dense object had entered the atmosphere. He could only see the sliver of light coming from the landing under his bedroom door, and that light was suddenly, completely blocked. He was staring at the ceiling, but he felt the presence of Barnaby looming over him, its cold porcelain face inches from his. He desperately wanted to close his eyes, but his eyelids were glued open. The silence was absolute, save for the rhythmic tick-tock now coming from the doll's chest cavity, counting down to some unseen moment. Then, the worry started again, closer now, and the sound of dry, cracked lips began to move, making a sound like sandpaper scraping wood. It wasn't a language. It was a mechanical repetition of 3 words. Lost, ... Tom, ... play, ... over and over, until the paralysis released him in a dizzying wave of nausea and cold sweat. Daniel immediately got up and threw Barnaby into the darkest corner of the attic, facing the wall, exactly as his grandmother used to keep it. He sealed the attic door with duct tape. He felt a fleeting sense of victory, a rational man conquering a superstitious fear. The victory lasted 1 day. The next night, the paralysis was instant, a full-body electroshock. And Barnaby was back. But this time, it wasn't standing. It was sitting directly on his chest, its velvet outfit heavy, its cold porcelain hands resting lightly on his collarbones. The cracked face was inches from his bait, the pupils of its painted blue eyes now rolling wildly, independently, like broken gyroscopes. The rhythmic worry was deafening, amplified by the position on his chest, and the tap-tap-tap was coming from inside his own head, a horrible internal sound of a clock counting backwards. Barnaby spoke again, but the words were clearer now, delivered in a terrifying, sing-song rhythm, perfectly synchronized with the internal ticking. Daniel, Daniel, you can't run from lost time. You can't hide from play. I have the key, now. And then? Barnaby's cold, dry fingers began to move, slowly lifting the collar of his stiff lace outfit, revealing a small, tarnished silver key nestled in the collarbone. It was the winding key. Daniel's vision tunneled. He knew the doll had wound itself up in the attic, powered by his fear, and now it was prepared to run its cycle. The mechanical voice changed its cadence, becoming faster, higher-pitched, repeating a set of instructions. If you move, the game ends. If you breathe deep, the game ends. If you even think of the key, the game ends. The horror wasn't the paralysis or the demon. It was the utter loss of autonomy, where even his internal thoughts were governed by the mechanical will of the doll. As the worry intensified, Barnaby slowly lifted one of its small, painted hands and tapped the cold porcelain finger precisely on Daniel's left eye, the same side as the crack on the doll's own face. The paralysis lifted with a blinding flash of pain, but the terror was incomplete. Daniel screamed, realizing that the doll was gone, but the sensation of that cold, tapping finger still lingered on his eyelid. He looked in the mirror, a hairline fracture, almost invisible, running from his eyebrow down through his left eye, mirroring the crack on Barnaby's face. The game hadn't ended. It had only just begun. The first time it happened, Liam thought the shadow was his own guilt personified. The second time, he called it a hallucination. By the third time, when his roommate, Marcus, started drawing the exact figure that haunted Liam's paralysis, Liam knew the shadow wasn't a private demon, it was a shared witness, and it had just crossed the boundary of his mind and entered their shared apartment. Liam and Marcus were roommates in a crumbling old duplex near campus, divided by a thin wall and a sheer lack of acoustic privacy. Liam's sleep paralysis was sporadic but violent. It always featured the witness, a tall, skeletal figure, impossibly thin, standing perfectly still next to the dresser, shrouded in a coat of pure, light-absorbing shadow. The witness never moved, never spoke, and never touched. It just stared. That silent, judgmental stare was enough to freeze the blood in Liam's veins. He had learned the routine. Panic, scream silently, wait for the release. The witness was his secret terror. But then, the external details started to merge with the internal nightmare. The witness always stood by the dresser, where Liam kept his watch and keys. After one particularly intense bout of paralysis, Liam woke up, heart pounding, and noticed his watch had been moved, not just bumped, but deliberately placed face down on the wooden surface. Liam dismissed it. Then, 2 weeks later, the paralysis hit again. The witness was there, staring, and Liam felt an intense need to focus on its silhouette. As he strained his immobilized eyes, he saw its shadow hand slowly reach out and adjust the photograph of Liam and Marcus from high school, slightly tilting the frame until it was perfectly straight. It was interacting with the real world. The next morning, Liam casually asked Marcus, "Did you touch the photo on the dresser?" Marcus looked up, pale. "No, why? I just fixed the tilt this morning. It was crooked, and you know how I hate crooked things." Liam's blood ran cold. The witness had straightened the photo during the night. The thought that the paralyzing demon was not a hallucination, but a physical entity operating in the room, capable of manipulation, was overwhelming. The terror escalated when Marcus began to draw. Marcus was a quiet art major, always sketching in his notebook. Liam walked into the kitchen one morning and saw Marcus intently focused on a new sketch. Liam froze. Marcus was drawing the witness. Not a generic dark figure, but the exact figure Liam saw. The impossible thinness, the slight stoop of the shoulders, the way the shadow seemed to fold in on itself, absorbing all light. "What is that?" Liam whispered, fear making his voice crack. Marcus didn't look up. "Just something I've been seeing." Liam pressed him. "Seeing where?" Marcus finally looked up, his eyes wide and vacant. "In my dreams. And sometimes, just standing there, next to the dresser." "Why?" Liam didn't tell him about the paralysis. He couldn't. He knew the witness was either transferring its image into Marcus's mind, or Marcus was experiencing the same entity while sleeping normally. The shared terror became a shared secret. Liam started monitoring Marcus. He noticed Marcus was having trouble sleeping. He'd wake up suddenly, covered in sweat, and immediately grab his sketchbook, furiously drawing the witness's silhouette. The drawings were becoming more detailed, moving from simple outlines to complex anatomical studies of pure shadow. One night, Liam stayed awake, nursing a terrible cup of instant coffee, determined to catch the witness without the veil of paralysis. Around 3:15 a.m., he heard a sound from Marcus's side of the room, not a snore, but a soft, choked whimper. He quietly crept to the dividing wall and listened. Marcus was fully awake, breathing shallowly, desperately. "Don't look at me," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with tears. Don't judge me." Liam knew Marcus was paralyzed. He tiptoed to the doorway, flashlight in hand, and peered into the dark room. He saw Marcus lying in bed, utterly still, and next to the dresser, the witness impossibly tall, perfectly black. But this time, it was doing something new. The witness slowly, deliberately turned its head toward the door, towards Liam, and its shadow hand lifted, not to adjust a photo, but to point directly at Marcus's immobile body. And then, the witness did something it had never done before. It smiled. The smile was not visible, for the witness had no features. But Liam felt the movement, a cold, sickening expansion in the air, a silent, triumphant expression of absolute malice. The paralysis hit Liam instantly, a silent scream freezing on his lips, pinning him to the doorway, his flashlight clattering to the floor. The witness stood between the two paralyzed roommates, its gaze shifting slowly, deliberately, back and forth, from Marcus to Liam, and then settling on the ceiling. It was observing them, documenting their shared terror. The next morning, Liam found a final sketch on Marcus's desk. It wasn't the witness. It was a drawing of Liam's paralyzed face, seen from the doorway, illuminated by a faint light. Underneath, Marcus had written in shaky letters, "It saw you see it. Now it knows we're both here. It wants the audience." They both knew the horror was no longer private. The witness had a double viewership, and the price of their surveillance was their sanity. The realization that the witness wanted an audience forced Liam and Marcus into immediate, desperate action. They agreed they had to break the connection, to disrupt the shared nature of the entity. They packed quickly and moved to two separate apartments 50 miles apart, severing all contact, believing that physical distance would dismantle the shared terror. For 3 weeks, Liam slept soundly, free of the paralysis and the oppressive shadow. He started to believe the witness was simply a highly localized, trauma-induced phenomenon that required their specific shared space to manifest. But then, the postcards started arriving. They weren't addressed to Liam or Marcus. They were addressed to the audience. The postcards were generic sunsets, tourist traps, but the handwriting on the back was identical to the shaky scrawl on Marcus's final sketch. The message was always the same, typed out using a vintage typewriter font. The audience is incomplete. The show must be watched by the proper critic. Liam called Marcus, breaking their silence. Marcus confirmed he was receiving the exact same postcards. The witness wasn't gone. It was communicating. It was using the mundane, external world to pull them back into its orbit. The horror reached its peak when Liam went to his favorite local bookstore, a comfortable small place where he felt safe. He was browsing the horror section when he felt that familiar, cold stillness behind him, the pressure of light being absorbed. He didn't turn around. He didn't need to. He knew the witness was there, standing silently. He walked to the checkout counter, his heart hammering. The cashier, a kindly older woman named Martha, smiled warmly. As she scanned his book, she paused, looking past Liam's shoulder with a curious, slightly annoyed expression. "Oh dear," she murmured. "Look at that mess." Liam didn't dare turn around. "What is it, Martha?" he managed. Martha leaned in conspiratorially. "That tall gentleman behind you, the one in the very dark coat. He just knocked over that whole display of literary fiction, and he's just staring at us, not moving. He's waiting for me to acknowledge him, I think. Some people just love the attention." Liam's world tilted. Martha saw it. The witness had successfully forced itself into the reality of a third, completely unconnected party. It was no longer a hallucination, shared or otherwise. It was a physical entity whose singular goal was to expand its viewership. Liam fled the store, leaving his book. The next morning, a postcard arrived. The scene was a generic library. The message: the critic has been assigned. The show is scheduled to begin. Liam found Marcus's last known address and drove there immediately. Marcus's apartment door was ajar. Inside, the walls were covered in charcoal drawings of the witness, thousands of them, stacked from floor to ceiling. In the middle of the room, Marcus was sitting, staring blankly, his eyes wide open, utterly still. He wasn't paralyzed by sleep. He was paralyzed by sheer, catatonic terror. Standing next to him was the witness, impossibly tall, its shadow radiating power, and sitting in the only chair in the room, holding a small notepad, was Martha, the kind bookstore cashier. She was wearing the witness's coat of pure shadow, and her eyes were empty. She looked up at Liam, her voice a low, raspy whisper that sounded like the dry scrape of charcoal on paper. "Welcome back," she said, nodding to a spot next to her. "The audience is finally complete. The show is ready." Liam felt the electric buzz hit his spine, the final, inescapable paralysis taking hold, knowing that he, Marcus, and now Martha, were simply the inaugural cast in the Witness's never-ending silent play.